The morning of Margaret Sullivan's 60th birthday dawned crisp and clear in suburban Denver. Golden autumn sunlight streamed through her kitchen windows, casting warm shadows across the marble countertops she'd saved 2 years to afford. The smell of fresh coffee mingled with vanilla candles as she arranged. White roses in crystal vases. 40-7 people were expected at 2 o'clock. The caterers would arrive in 3 hours. Everything was perfect except for the one person who mattered most. Her phone sat silent on the counter. No missed calls, no texts, no happy birthday, Mom from Marcus, her only child, the brilliant Harvard-educated lawyer who now commanded a corner office in Manhattan's most prestigious firm. Margaret scrolled through their last conversation from 3 weeks ago. "I'm really looking forward to seeing you for my birthday, sweetheart," she'd said during their usual Sunday call. "Yeah, Mom, about that ... Marcus had replied with that familiar hesitation. "The Peterson merger is getting complicated. I might not be able to make it. But, Marcus, it's my 60th. We've been planning this for months." "I know, but this deal is worth $12 million to the firm. I can't just walk away. Can't someone else handle it, just for one weekend?" "Mom, you don't understand. I'm the lead attorney. This could make my career." He'd promised to try his best, but Margaret knew that tone. It was the same one he'd used for her 55th birthday, for 2 missed Thanksgivings. For every family event that conflicted with his relentless climb up the corporate ladder, the doorbell rang. Dorothy Chen, her 72-year-old neighbor, stood holding a wrapped gift. "Happy birthday, dear. I know I'm early, but I wanted to drop this off." Dorothy had become Margaret's closest friend since Robert died 4 years ago. She had that practical wisdom that comes from surviving life's curveballs. "Thank you, Dorothy." Margaret's forced smile finally cracked. "Marcus isn't coming." Dorothy's face fell. "Oh, honey, I'm so sorry. He hasn't even called. It's 11:30, and he hasn't called to say happy birthday." Dorothy pulled Margaret into a hug. "That boy doesn't know what he's missing. I keep making excuses for him. I tell myself he's busy, that his career is important. But Dorothy, I don't think he cares about me anymore. Don't say that. When was the last time he initiated a conversation? When was the last time he asked how I was doing?" Margaret's eyes blazed with hurt that had been building for years. "I planned this entire party hoping he'd come. I even ordered his favorite cake." The next 2 hours passed in a blur of final preparations and arrivals. Margaret's sister Janet came with her husband, followed by book club friends, former teaching colleagues, and neighbors. Each person asked the same question: "Where's Marcus?" "He's running late," Margaret told her sister. "Tied up with work," she explained to others, the words tasting like ashdot. By 2:15, the house was full of people, but Margaret felt completely alone. She moved through the crowd like a ghost, accepting birthday wishes while her heart grew heavier. At 2:30, her phone finally rang. Margaret lunged for it, hoping it was Marcus. Double quotes. "Mrs. Sullivan. This is Jessica, Mr. Sullivan's assistant. He asked me to call and wish you a happy birthday. He's in depositions all day, but wanted you to know he's thinking of you." The words hit like a physical blow. Her son couldn't even call himself. He'd delegated her 60th birthday to his assistant. "He also wanted you to know he's having your gift delivered next week. Something special from Tiffany's." Margaret hung up without responding, her hands shaking around her. The party continued, but she felt like she was drowning. Dorothy appeared at her elbow. "What happened?" his assistant called. "His assistant?" Margaret's voice was getting louder, drawing stares. "He couldn't even call me himself. He had his secretary do it." "Margaret, calm down. People are starting to notice." But Margaret was beyond caring. For years of loneliness since Robert's death, for years of Marcus being too busy for anything that mattered to her, and now this final insult. "You know what?" Margaret said, her voice carrying across the room. "I'm done." The party gradually fell silent as 46 people turned to look at the birthday girl having a breakdown. "I want to thank you all for coming," Margaret announced, her voice stronger than it had been all day. "But I need to make an announcement. My son couldn't make it again. He couldn't even call me himself. He had his assistant do it." The room was completely silent now, so I've made a decision. If my birthday isn't important enough for my son to acknowledge properly, then his birthday isn't important enough for me to celebrate. She walked to the kitchen and returned with a thick manila folder containing contracts and receipts. "Marcus's 35th birthday is in 6 weeks. I've booked the country club, hired caterers, sent invitations, and paid $5,000 in deposits for a party to celebrate a son who can't even call his mother." She picked up her phone and dialed, putting it on speaker. "Lakewood Country Club. This is Amanda." "Amanda, this is Margaret Sullivan. I need to cancel the birthday party reservation for November 15th. Mrs. Sullivan, But that's in 6 weeks. You'll lose all your deposits. Margaret looked around at 46 people who had shown up for her, then thought of Marcus in his corner office, completely unaware his mother was surrounded by friends. I've never been more sure of anything in my life. Cancel it all. As she hung up, the room erupted in surprised murmurs. Margaret stood in the middle of it all, feeling something she hadn't felt in years. Powerful. But as the adrenaline faded, she realized she had no idea what came next. The news spread like wildfire through their social circle. By Sunday evening, Margaret's phone rang, constantly friends checking on her, acquaintances fishing for gossip. She let most calls go to voicemail. Sunday morning found her in the garden, deadheading roses and pulling weeds with more aggression than necessary. The physical work felt grounding after yesterday's emotional hurricane. Dorothy appeared at 10 with coffee. How are you feeling? Margaret accepted the warm cup gratefully. I keep going back and forth between feeling proud and feeling like I've made a terrible mistake. What does your gut tell you? My gut says I should have done this years ago. Margaret sat back on her heels. Marcus hasn't spent a birthday with me since he turned 30. 5 years of excuses and last-minute cancellations. But he's your only child, and I'm his only mother. Margaret's voice carried new sharpness. Robert used to say I spoiled him, that I never made him face consequences. Maybe Robert was right. Around noon, her sister Janet called. Margaret, what got into you yesterday? Bill and I barely slept thinking about you. I'm fine, Janet, fine. You canceled your son's party in front of half the neighborhood. That's vindictive. Vindictive. Is it vindictive to expect my son to call on my 60th birthday? To want him to show up for the party I've been planning for months? Of course not. But when was the last time your kids missed your birthday? When was the last time you felt like you had to beg for their attention? Janet was quiet. Both her children lived nearby and called several times a week. That's different. Is it? Or did you just raise your children to value family differently? After hanging up, Margaret found herself in Marcus's old bedroom, kept exactly as he'd left it for college. His trophies lined the shelves, his Harvard acceptance letter framed on the desk. This room had been a shrine to her son's achievements for nearly 2 decades. She opened his old desk drawer and found middle school journals she'd never read before. Opening one randomly, Mom and Dad fought again last night. Mom was crying at breakfast. She tries so hard to make everything perfect. Sometimes I wish she wouldn't try so hard. It makes me feel bad when I can't be as perfect as she wants. Margaret's hands trembled as she flipped pages. Got an A on my history test, and Mom said, "That's wonderful, but I know you can do better. Why can't an A be good enough?" I got an A, and it's still not enough. Mom spent 3 hours making my favorite dinner because I made varsity. She was so excited about telling Dad, but I felt tired. Everything becomes this huge production. Sometimes I think she's more excited about my successes than I am. Margaret closed the journal with shaking hands. Had her love somehow taught Marcus? He could never just exist, that he always had to be performing, achieving, being worthy. Her phone rang. Unknown number. Mrs. Sullivan. This is David Park from the Manhattan Tribune. I understand you made quite a statement yesterday. Would you share your story with our readers? How did you get this number? Social media is powerful. Someone posted about it, and it's been shared extensively. The story of a mother canceling her son's party has struck a chord. Margaret hung up and immediately checked Facebook. Rebecca Martinez from Book Club had posted a photo of Margaret holding the contracts. Today I witnessed something incredible. My friend Margaret Sullivan celebrated her 60th birthday, and when her son couldn't even call her, sent his assistant. Instead, she canceled the $5,000 party she'd planned for him. Sometimes you have to draw a line. #boundaries matter. #mothers deserve respect. 300 shares. Comments ranged from supportive to critical to cruel. Dozens of people had tagged Marcus. Margaret clicked on Marcus's profile. His last post, proud to announce my promotion to senior partner. Hard work pays off. 47 likes. Professional congratulations. Nothing about family, nothing personal. Just achievement. Her phone rang Marcus's office number. Mom. His voice was tight, controlled. We need to talk. Hello, Marcus. Happy belated birthday wishes to me, I suppose. Mom, what the hell did you do? No apology, no acknowledgement. Just anger about his embarrassment. I made a decision. Long overdue. Do you know how this looks? I'm getting tagged by strangers calling me a terrible son. My colleagues are asking about it. This affects my professional reputation, your professional reputation. That's what you're worried about. Not that you hurt your mother, your professional reputation, Mom. You're being dramatic. When was the last time you called me just to see how I was doing? Silence. When was the last time you visited without me begging? More silence. When was the last time you acted like you wanted to be my son instead of tolerating the obligation? That's not fair. Marcus, I spent yesterday surrounded by 46 people who cared enough to show up. You couldn't pick up the phone. I was working. This merger is important. More important than your mother. It's not that simple. It's exactly that simple. I've spent 4 years since your father died trying to maintain some relationship with you. I call every week. I plan visits months ahead to fit your schedule. I celebrate every achievement while you can't acknowledge milestones in my life. Mom, I'm not finished. You want to know what's not fair? I apparently raised you to believe your career and success matter more than the people who love you. I failed to teach you that love requires effort, that family requires presence. Long silence. So what now? You're really not throwing the party. Margaret laughed bitterly. Marcus, do you even want a party? When did you last celebrate your birthday? When did you last enjoy any family gathering? That's not the point. It's exactly the point. I've been throwing parties you don't want, planning visits you don't enjoy, maintaining a relationship you don't value. I'm 60 years old. I don't have unlimited time to waste on people who don't want to be in my life. Of course I want to be in your life. Then act like it. Show up for it. Don't just tolerate it. Another long silence. I have to go. Conference call in 5 minutes. Of course you do. We'll talk about this later. Will we? Or will your assistant call me? Marcus hung up. Margaret sat in her kitchen, feeling simultaneously victorious and heartbroken. She'd finally said everything she'd been thinking for years, so why did it hurt so much? 3 weeks later, Marcus hadn't contacted her once. Margaret tried to convince herself this was what she'd wanted to stop being the only one maintaining their relationship. But as October melted into November, the silence felt less like victory and more like loss. The story had eventually died down, though it occasionally resurfaced when someone shared Rebecca's post. Margaret deleted her Facebook account after strangers debated whether she was a hero setting boundaries or a manipulative narcissist. She was neither. She was just tired. On Tuesday before Thanksgiving, Dorothy found Margaret in pajamas at 2 p.m. staring at cold coffee. "This has gone on long enough," Dorothy announced. "Get dressed. We're going shopping. I don't need anything. You rest. Need to remember there's a world beyond the one person too stubborn to apologize. What if I was wrong? What if I pushed him away permanently?" Dorothy sat across from her. "Let me ask you something. What kind of relationship did you have before your birthday? Really think about it?" Margaret considered. "We talked every Sunday. You called him. Did he ever call you?" "Well, no. Did he visit because he wanted to or because you asked?" "I usually suggested visits. Did he seem happy when he was here? Present, engaged?" Margaret thought about Marcus's last visits on his phone constantly, taking work calls during dinner, seeming restless and eager to leave. No, he didn't. So what have you lost? A relationship where you did all the work and he showed up occasionally out of obligation? Dorothy was right, but it didn't make the silence easier. They went to the mall that afternoon, walking through busy corridors, seeing families shopping together. Margaret felt both envious and grateful at the art supply store. A young clerk with paint-stained fingernails smiled encouragingly. "Can I help you find anything? I used to paint. A long time ago. I'm thinking about starting again." "That's wonderful. The secret is nobody's very good when they start again. But that's what makes it fun." Margaret left with watercolors, brushes, paper, and a small easel. It was the first money she'd spent on herself in months. That evening, she sat up in the sunroom and painted for the first time in decades. It was terrible purple blobs for mountains, muddy sky, lopsided clouds. But Margaret couldn't stop smiling. Thanksgiving came quietly. Instead of Janet's house with inevitable questions about Marcus, Margaret volunteered at the community center. It was the first Thanksgiving she'd enjoyed in years. December arrived with early snow. Margaret was painting by her window when the doorbell rang. A Tiffany & Co. delivery. Inside. Diamond earrings. Beautiful and expensive and completely impersonal. The card read, "Happy birthday, Mom. Sorry it's late. Love, Marcus." Margaret held them up, watching them sparkle like captured stars. They were objectively beautiful, probably worth 3 months of groceries, but they felt cold purchased by someone who knew her birthstone was emerald, who knew she preferred silver, who knew she rarely wore jewelry since Robert died. These were earrings you bought for a mother you didn't really know? On December 15th, her phone rang while she painted. Marcus's number. "Mom, I need to ask you something." Brisk, businesslike, no greeting, no acknowledgement of 2 months' silence. "Hello, Marcus, right? Hi. I need your famous pot roast recipe. Samantha and I are hosting Christmas Eve dinner for colleagues, and she wants to make a good impression." "Samantha, my girlfriend. I think I mentioned her. He hadn't ever. How long have you been seeing Samantha? About 8 months. Can you just send the recipe? We're having 12 people over 8 months. A serious relationship he'd never mentioned. I'd be happy to share the recipe, but why haven't you told me about her? I don't know, Mom. We don't really talk about personal stuff. The words stung. Because they were true, I'd like to meet her. Are you inviting me to Christmas Eve dinner? The pause was answer enough. Mom, it's more of a work thing, professional networking, not really a family event. I see. So you want my recipe to help your girlfriend impress your colleagues, but you don't want your mother there. It's not like that. What's it like then, Mom? You're being dramatic again. Am I? You've hidden a relationship for 8 months. You're hosting Christmas Eve and didn't invite me? You want me to help impress people more important to you than I am. How am I being dramatic? Forget the recipe. I'll figure something else out. Marcus, wait. He'd already hung up. Margaret sat surrounded by her paintings and felt something shift, not heartbreak this time, but acceptance. Marcus didn't want a mother. He wanted an obligation fulfilled, a box checked, a relationship maintained at minimum required levels. She opened her computer and found the pot roast recipe, her grandmother's recipe, passed down through generations of family dinners and love. Dear Marcus, here is the pot roast recipe you requested. I wanted to let you know I won't be calling you on Sundays anymore. Our conversations have become more obligation than pleasure for both of us, and it's time to stop pretending otherwise. I love you. I will always love you. But I'm no longer willing to maintain a relationship where I do all the work and you participate only when you need something. If you ever decide you'd like a real relationship with your mother, one where we both invest time and genuine interest, I'll be here. But I won't keep calling and hoping while you remain indifferent to my presence. I hope you're happy. I hope Samantha makes you happy in ways I apparently never could. Love always. MOMPS. The secret is browning it in bacon fat first. Your grandmother taught me that. She also taught me a recipe is just ingredients, unless you put love into the cooking. Margaret read it 3 times before sending, expecting regret. Instead, she felt relief. Christmas morning dawned clear and cold. Margaret woke in her own bed with no schedule to keep and no expectations to meet. She made coffee and cinnamon toast, sat with her latest painting, and watched sunrise over her snow-covered garden. It was the most peaceful Christmas she'd had in years. At the community center that afternoon, serving Christmas dinner, she worked beside Alina, a 70-year-old whose daughter lived in California. Haven't seen her in 3 years, Alina mentioned. Used to drive myself crazy wondering what I did wrong. Then I realized I was waiting for permission to be happy from someone. Too busy to notice I was waiting. What changed? I stopped waiting. Started volunteering, joined book club, took salsa dancing. Best thing I ever did. That evening, Margaret researched art classes at the community college. She found a watercolor workshop starting in January and registered, paying with money saved for Marcus's Christmas present. She couldn't remember the last time she'd looked forward to something entirely her own. Spring arrived early with crocuses pushing through snow in Margaret's garden. She was kneeling among flower beds preparing soil for new plantings when she spotted a familiar figure walking up her driveway. Marcus looked thinner, his expensive suit hanging loosely. His usually perfect hair was disheveled, dark circles under his eyes. Speaking of too many late nights and stress, Margaret rose slowly, brushing dirt from her knees. She wore old jeans and Robert's flannel shirt, hair in a simple ponytail. No makeup. For the first time in decades, she hadn't dressed up for her son. Hello, Marcus. Hi, Mom. You look good. Different, but good. Margaret had lost 15 pounds since Christmas, not from dieting, but from rediscovering activities that engaged her. Watercolor classes led to hiking excursions. Hiking led to a Saturday walking group. The walking group led to friendships with women who invited her to restaurants, museums, book discussions that had nothing to do with entertaining someone else. Thank you. What brings you to Denver? Can we talk inside? In the kitchen, Marcus noticed her small easel by the window where she worked on morning sketches. You're painting again. These are really good. Thank you. I'm taking classes. They sat with coffee, silence stretching between them. Margaret waited, having learned the value of not rushing to fill uncomfortable spaces. Samantha left me, Marcus said finally. I'm sorry you're hurting. Are you? Margaret considered honestly. I'm sorry you're in pain. I'm not sorry a relationship requiring you to hide your family ended. She didn't make me hide you 8 months, Marcus. You were with someone 8 months and never mentioned her. You hosted Christmas Eve and didn't invite your only parent. Either she asked you to exclude me, or you decided I wasn't suitable for her circle. I was ashamed, he said quietly. Of me? Of me? Of how I treated you? Of being 35 and having my mother call weekly because I never call her. Of missing your 60th birthday for a meeting that could have been rescheduled. Of not knowing your friends' names or what makes you happy. Go on. Samantha asked about my family early. I realized I didn't know how to talk about you without revealing what a terrible son I am. So you chose not to talk about me at all. It seemed easier than explaining why I never see you. Why I act like having a mother is a burden instead of ... His voice cracked. Instead of something precious. Margaret touched his hand. What happened with Samantha? She figured it out. Started asking why you weren't in my life. When I told her about your birthday, she said something that's haunted me for months. What? She said, any woman who raised a son successful enough to make senior partner before 35 must be remarkable. And she couldn't understand why I was embarrassed by you. She said if I couldn't appreciate my own mother, I probably wasn't capable of appreciating any woman. She sounds smart. She was right about everything. Marcus looked directly at Margaret for the first time. Mom, I don't know how to fix this. I don't know how to fix us. Margaret studied her son, struggling with admissions that clearly cost him. The old Margaret would have rushed to reassure him, but she'd learned the importance of letting people sit with consequences. Marcus, when you were growing up, did you feel loved? Yes, maybe too much. What do you mean? You were so proud of everything I did. Every achievement, every grade you celebrated like it was the most important thing in the world. I started feeling like I had to keep achieving to keep earning that love. I never meant for you to feel that way. I know, but I started believing your love was conditional on success, that I had to keep being exceptional to deserve your attention, and when you became successful enough to not need my approval, I stopped trying to earn it. I took it for granted. I thought you'd always be there, always love me unconditionally, no matter how little effort I put in. Margaret nodded, and I enabled that by never setting boundaries, never requiring you to reciprocate effort. You shouldn't have had to require it. I should have wanted to, but you didn't. That's something we both have to face. Silence again, more contemplative than strained. Mom, I want to do better. I want to be a better son, but I don't know where to start. Margaret looked at Marcus really, looked for the first time in years. Not at his achievements or success, but at the man himself. He looked lost, exhausted, genuinely remorseful, but also like someone who'd spent so long defining himself by external validation that he'd forgotten how to form authentic connections. I don't want you to be a better son out of guilt. I don't want you to call more often because you feel bad. I don't want visits because you think you should. Then what? I want you to want to know me? Not as your proud mother, but as a person with interests and opinions and experiences. I want you to be curious about my life the way you'd be curious about a friend's. I am curious. Are you? When did you last ask me about something other than my health? When did you last ask my opinion? When did you tell me something personal without me dragging it out? Marcus tried to remember. I can't. Neither can I. That's not entirely your fault. I spent years making our relationship about you, your needs, achievements, schedule. I forgot to be a whole person within it. I became just Marcus's mother, instead of Margaret, who happens to be your mother, but now you're painting. You seem more yourself than I've seen in years. I've had time to rediscover who Margaret is when she's not constantly worried about whether her son is happy with her. Who is she? The question seemed genuinely interested, and Margaret felt hope. Someone who loves hiking mountains and trying new restaurants with friends. Someone who's discovered she has strong opinions about art and literature. Someone who volunteers at the Literacy Center because helping people read gives her more satisfaction than planning parties for people who don't want to attend. Marcus listened intently, perhaps the first time in years he was truly paying attention. Rather than waiting to talk about himself, she sounds like someone I'd like to know, he said quietly. Would you? Really? Or are you just saying that because you feel guilty? I think I really would. But Mom, I don't know how to have relationships that aren't centered around my career and problems. I don't know how to be interested in other people without making it about me. Margaret felt maternal protectiveness for the adult Marcus, recognizing gaps in his emotional development. That's something you might want to work on. Maybe with someone who can help you figure out why success became more important than relationships. You mean therapy? I mean whatever help you need to become the person you want to be, not just who you think you should be. Marcus nodded. I've been thinking about that, especially since Samantha left. She said some things that made me realize I might not be as emotionally healthy as I thought. What kinds of things? That I treat relationships like business transactions. That I expect people to be grateful for my time without offering the same appreciation. That I've spent so much time trying to be impressive that I forgot how to be interested in anything besides my own success. Those are hard things to hear, but true. And Mom, if I'm honest, I think I learned some patterns from watching Dad. Margaret's breath caught. Marcus rarely mentioned Robert. What do you mean? Dad was always working, always focused on the next promotion, and you were always accommodating that, managing the house and me so he could focus on career, I think. I learned to expect that kind of accommodation from women. Your father loved us, I know, but he loved his work more, didn't he? And you taught me that was normal, that it was okay for men to prioritize careers while women prioritized relationships. I did the best I could with what I knew then. I'm not blaming you. I'm trying to understand how I became someone who thinks his time is more valuable than everyone else's. Margaret saw not the successful lawyer who disappointed her, but a man finally understanding that achievement without connection was hollow. Marcus, are you happy? Really happy, not just successful. Marcus stared out at her garden where spring flowers were blooming. No, I don't think I am. I thought I would be when I made senior partner, got the corner office, started making dream money. But I feel empty, tired, like I'm working toward something that keeps moving away. What do you think you're working toward? I don't know anymore. Success, recognition, financial security. But I have all that, and it's not enough. There's always another deal, another promotion that's supposed to make me satisfied. Margaret took her son's hand. What if what you're looking for isn't professional achievement? What if it's connection, relationship, being known and valued for who you are, instead of what you've accomplished? You mean like what you and Dad had? What your father and I had was complicated? We loved each other, but I'm not sure we knew each other. I spent 40 years trying to be the perfect wife and mother. He spent 40 years trying to be the perfect provider. We were both so busy fulfilling roles that we forgot to be real people together. But you seemed happy. We seemed functional. That's not the same thing. I don't want you to repeat our mistakes. I don't want you spending 20 more years climbing career ladders that lead to emptiness. And I don't want to spend my remaining years maintaining a relationship with someone going through motions out of guilt. So what do we do? Margaret smiled, feeling hope for their relationship for the first time in years. We start over. We get to know each other as who we actually are, not who we think we should be. We build a relationship based on mutual interest and respect, not obligation. How? Tell me about your life. Not work, not achievements, but your actual life. What do you do for fun? What are you reading? What makes you laugh? What scares you? What do you dream about that has nothing to do with career advancement? Marcus looked panicked. I don't know if I know those answers. Then that's where you start. Figure out who Marcus is when he's not being a lawyer, and I'll share who Margaret is when she's not being your mother. Maybe we'll discover we actually like each other, and if we don't, then at least we'll know the truth and can decide how to move forward. Marcus nodded slowly. I'd like that. I'd like to try. Good. But Marcus, I need you to understand something. I'm not going back to how things were. I'm not being the only one making effort. If you want to rebuild our connection, you have to show up consistently, not just when you're feeling guilty. I understand. This isn't just about calling more or visiting more. It's about fundamentally changing how you approach relationships. Learning to be interested in other people's lives. To offer support without being asked to show up emotionally as well as physically. That sounds terrifying and necessary. Margaret laughed, surprised by his honesty. Most important changes do. They talked another hour, tentatively beginning to know each other as adults, rather than mother and son locked in decades-old patterns. Marcus told her about his apartment, cooking attempts, recent discovery of jazz music. Margaret shared art class stories, hiking adventures, volunteer work. It wasn't miraculous reconciliation. There were awkward silences, moments when both fell back into old patterns. Instances where Margaret could see Marcus struggling to ask questions that weren't about himself. But it was a beginning. As Marcus prepared to leave, he paused at the door. Mom, I know I don't have the right to ask this, but would you consider having dinner with me sometime? Not a special occasion, not because I need something, just because I'd like to spend time with you. Margaret smiled. I'd like that. But Marcus, I have plans most evenings now. You'll need to work around my schedule instead of expecting me to work around yours. Marcus looked surprised, then thoughtful. Of course, what works for you? Check with me next week. I'll see what I have available. Watching her son drive away, Margaret felt cautiously optimistic for the first time in years. She didn't know if Marcus could sustain the changes he claimed to want. She didn't know if they could build the relationship she'd always hoped for, but she knew her happiness didn't depend on those answers, whether Marcus became the son she'd hoped for or remained distant and achievement-focused. Margaret had rediscovered who she was beyond his approval. She had friends who valued her company, interests that engaged her mind, and a life that felt full without requiring anyone else's participation. That evening, painting the sunset over her garden, Margaret realized canceling Marcus's birthday party had been the best gift she'd ever given herself, the gift of refusing to accept less than she deserved. the gift of boundaries, and the gift of discovering she was enough all by herself. The painting she created was her best yet, vibrant, confident, alive with color and possibility. She signed it with a flourish, marking not just when it was completed, but when she'd finally learned the difference between loving someone and losing yourself in the process. Outside her window, spring was arriving in earnest, and Margaret Sullivan was ready to bloom.